Okay, I think if we start going with housekeeping and welcomes, then hopefully numbers will sort of stabilise in a minute and we can get going with the main content. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today on our Beyond Falls, How Sensor Tech is Unlocking Safer, Calmer Care. It's really great to have you with us. We have a brilliant team of speakers with us today, and we'll introduce those in just a second. So just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. The webinar is being recorded and you will be sent a recording after the session. So don't feel you need to be scribbling notes or anything, because you will get that again, along with slides and anything else that we discussed during the session we think would be useful. We will share resources with you. Attendees, you are all on mute and you can't be seen, so don't worry if you're having your lunch or doing something else, not a problem. But do please engage with us both in the webinar chat for general comments and introductions, or via the Q&A function to ask questions. If you can use the Q&A for questions, that is ideal. It just helps us manage them a bit better behind the scenes. We'll come to those then as soon as we're able, sort of during the session. As I said, you will get access to the recording and the slides, so they will be sent to you afterwards. So running order for today, after I've finished with our basic welcome, I will pass over to Richard Ayres from Care England, who will do a bit of scene setting around sensor tech and what's going on a bit more nationally. And we will then pass over to Ally Cares to hear more about their specific sensor tech that they have on the market, the functionality of that, but most importantly, some really amazing provider insights. So we've got Melanie Dawson from The Lawns and Samir Patel from Oakland's Rest Home, who'll be giving us some insights into how they've used it in their settings. At the end, there should be plenty of time for questions and answers and any further conversation that comes about following the session. So just before we get kicking, a little bit about us at Digital Care Hub. For those of you that don't know us, we are a national not-for-profit and we are commissioned by the Department of Health and Social Care to support the social care industry to embrace digitisation, but most importantly, to do it safely. So if you haven't come across us before, do take a visit to our website. There's guidance, support, we have a helpline, we do case studies, huge array of different tools and resources to help you on your digital journey. We always like to think of ourselves as a translator from sort of tech and policy into sort of the reality of you as a care provider. So hopefully nice and accessible and easy to digest. We cover a range of different topics, from data protection and cybersecurity through to AI and robotics and sort of everything in between. So do take a look. And I will finish there and hand over to Richard from Care England. Welcome, Richard.
Well, thank you so much. And hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Richard Ayres. I'm a social care advisor here at Care England. And thank you for joining us all today for this talk on Sensor Tech, the series provided by Digital Care Hub. It really is a privilege to talk to you today about tech, because I believe it's really transformational for the care sector and becoming another critical tool for care services in the UK. Or as I like to often refer to them, given the acuity and the dependency of care service over the last 10 years, we are the sort of the new NHS. Today, I want to explain why I believe that sensor tech is no longer optional for adult care services. It's now absolutely essential. Now, it has the ability through evidence and studies to transform care services. It can save money for the NHS and also for care providers. And most importantly, above everything else, it can improve the lives of people that we support. So that probably drives the question, well, what is sensor tech? Because I think there's a lot of tech out there. When I say sensor tech, I mean discrete technology that can constantly and safely monitors what's happening in a room or in a person's environment. And I think I've found things of like falls detection, movement mapping, pressure monitoring, smart devices that can spot change in behaviour or change in health. They're generally not cameras in their traditional sense. They are sort of quiet, discrete sensors using motion and sound, temperature and artificial intelligence to really detect patterns and warn us of risks and that they crucially help staff step in before an accident occurs, ideally, or as quickly as possible if an accident or an incident does occur. Um, it can be about a prevention, but it can be about prevention. It's not always about just reaction. So we're not reacting necessarily to what is being told to us. It can really help us with prevention. It's about spotting things that we believe that spotting things that we may not always see, and sometimes preventing them from happening at all. Ideally, it's about and utilising the AI resources to really help our understanding and decision making to provide better care to those that we look after. And we shouldn't be frightened by AI. And I think AI is behind a lot of this functionality, and we mustn't be frightened by it. But we're not talking about the AI, the likes of ChatGPT, to monitor our residents. It's about the AI reviewing more data than a human can process in just a few seconds, and returning that information back to a human decision maker to give them the information intelligence to make an informed decision about enhancing kind of care. An example, and I've just come off a call where we've demoed a system that we've developed, the Smart Care Intel tool, which is a discrete plug for a tool we are using for AI. And it's doing exactly that to help care providers improve the quality of decisions that they make. Because the tool that we've developed looks through 100,000 CQC reports. It looks through all the CQC inspection reports, the NICE guidelines, NHS best practice, all the quality statements, the regulations, fundamental standards, health and safety exec information, companies' house data, HMRC data, and a few other key resources within seconds, and can process the quality related issues through all of that information, which will take a human months to process and review in just a few seconds. Our AI tool is really looking at just that information that turns quality problems into solutions in less than sort of 10, 15 seconds. And I'll drop my shameless plug into the chat when I finish talking, so you can look it up for yourselves if that would be interesting for you. But that's just an example how AI can help function and process large amounts of data in seconds. And with sensor tech, we don't even need to be in the room to be able to do that. We've got sensors there to do that for us. So it probably takes us to why this is vital right now in the UK. And I think it's, we all know our population is aging, and more people need complex care. And as I very flippantly mentioned earlier on, up front, residential and nursing care homes, for example, are now like new acute hospital wings. We're providing care for far more dependent people in social care than we were 10 years ago, in the same services. And it means that people need more care today than they did 10 years ago. And, second of all, social care faces workforce shortages and increasing pressure. So you've got much more acute facilities and much more demands on the workforce. And equally on both, day shifts and night shifts, you've got resourcing issues. I think another point is the NHS is under huge strain. And as our care providers with high attrition rates of staff and workforce, those challenges that brings, and dealing with constant pressures and increases in acuity, hospital admissions, ambulance call outs, the treatment of falls, pressure ulcers, UTIs, these all cost the NHS billions every year. And it's businesses like our own businesses and the taxpayer that are picking up those costs. So that's why I think, this technology can help impact some of those issues and drive efficiency in those areas to try and hopefully reduce some costs for the NHS. But national policy is on our side. The government plan for digital health and social care, and the funding behind various grants and funds for connectivity and digital tech from government, local authorities, ICBs. I think even the National Lottery are offering some funding in some cases. And there's a lot of competition in the market, which renders this tech affordable. We've not just got one provider, there are multiple providers who are able to provide similar types of tech, all doing slightly different things, but it creates competition in the market, which keeps the prices down and makes this affordable. And all of those resources on top of what Digital Care Hub offer all mean we have the right climate to really support and act on integrating these digital devices of sensor tech to add value to those we care for. Um, the evidence is already here. It's British-based UK evidence. It's not just overseas trials in distant countries. We know there are some of the Northern European and Scandic countries they're far more advanced in some of their centre tech than we are, but there is some great centre tech out there, and we've seen a lot of movement over the last 10 years of this tech, how it's really evolved and how it's now rapidly evolving, starting primarily with falls. But we've seen examples where falls have been cut by around 2/3 thanks to this tech, and I think the NHS are using it in some trials as well, and they've got examples of ambulance call outs after falls dropped by, I think it's 97% in NHS trials, and that's money and heartache saved immediately for us as care providers, the NHS as a health system, but also the individuals themselves, their families and their loved ones. So the NHS have adopted AI tools, and they got in one of their studies, I think they predict also a 97% reduction in falls as a result of their technology. So this tech is already helping community teams keep people well and out of hospital. But we know it works on things like pressure ulcers. We did our own trial on automatic turning systems that use monitors and sensors, and showed significant reductions in pressure damage and lighter workload for staff, which means less pain for residents and fewer costly complications for the NHS. So from my perspective, or from Care England's perspective, sensor tech that alerts people who have not moved and need repositioning, becomes absolutely critical to managing pressure reductions, but also helping to save billions of pounds to the NHS, and that's money that can be diverted back into social care. And we did put a paper into the Casey review stating exactly that. I think across the country there are projects that have been supported by the Digital Care Hub, I believe, and they've shown that sensor-driven technology can free up care workers' time, giving managers live information to help residents stay independent and safe. That reduces deconditioning, which is really, really important for us, keeping residents mobile. For many, though, the key question is, what does it mean in terms of pounds, shillings, and pence? What's the return on investment? And we know falls alone cost the NHS about £2 billion a year. About 25% of that is attributed from social care. So if we can prevent just a fraction of those falls, the savings run to hundreds of millions of pounds, and that's money which can be re-injected back into social care. And that was exactly what our sort of Casey paper was. Pressure ulcer prevention is exactly the same, runs into billions, and that's sensor technology, moving people, keeping them, if the sensor shows us that someone hasn't moved, we can get them sort of move more, help them with their mobility. This kind of technology can really help us solve problems and reduce costs to the NHS, getting that money diverted to social care. So spotting changes in breathing, coughing, sleep disturbance can really also alert care providers to other things that if we're not in the room, we don't know about, which means we can really target better care and provision. And people can get the support for things like chest infections and UTIs before they become an emergency A&E admission, or we have to call a GP out, or delirium kicks in. The distress that we can reduce on those that we care for through sensor tech is phenomenal, and that really is the sole business case for doing this. The saving money at the NHS, the saving money by the care providers, better resource utilisation, healthier, happier residents are all byproducts of what we really should be doing for our residents. The benefits are for the whole system. Fewer incidents means that fewer emergency transfers, which means our insurance policies as care providers go down because we're reducing the regulatory risks on our services. It gives us more time that we can put into other tasks. It's not about necessarily saving the money, it's about saving the time that we can invest in providing better, high quality care in other areas. So there is a return on investment for and a business case for every business. But for the people we care for and their families and loved ones, the value is really beyond that price. I think fewer injuries, fewer hospital stays, far greater sense of safety, independence and dignity, reduced deconditioning. These are all the reasons why we all came into care. That's what providers stand for. And that's what we kind of do. That's what you guys do every single day. And in a changing sector of rising acuity, being that new sort of what the NHS was 10 years ago. We are very much like that in a lot of our care services. We need to make changes so we can continue to provide the highest quality care. We can't keep throwing resource at the problem. We've got to, create solutions through digital technology that give us intelligence to help us solve those problems with the resources that we've got, because our fees are not going up to a level where we can just suddenly pay for more people to come and provide the care. We need digital technology to do it. And sensor tech really is that enabler to deal with that rise in acuity. But of course, there are barriers. Upfront costs of the tech can worry some providers. Some of those who are financially struggling at the moment, capital investment costs, business cases are needed. Sensor tech is just one area that a home needs to, or a service needs to invest capital in. So, some homes need to focus on, enhancing broadband capacity and digital care records before they can even think of this technology. Staff need training and confidence. That's a huge area. We've got an average workforce age 45 with 30% over the age of 50. And people like myself who are in their 50s, some of us struggle with technology. And we also need to protect the privacy and dignity of people. But all of those barriers are surmountable. There are grants and technology funds that exist. Connectivity is improving really at a rapid pace, and many of the latest sensor tech are really not intrusive, and they're fully compliant with all data privacy laws and rules. They're intuitive and easy to use. They alert the user to the issues they're programmed to alert them to. So sensor tech is really part of the solution, not the impediment. And we really encourage people to engage in the conversation. So I guess we kind of really need to consider what we need to do. And I believe that we need to consider embedding sensor tech into everyday practice. I think it's the solution we need to avoid constantly throwing resources at the increased acuity that we're taking on. We must use the funding on offer to produce clear return on investments for our leaders to invest in this technology. We must share the case studies that are being shared with you and the best practice so that everyone can learn from early adopters, continue to work with government, ICSs and local authorities so that sensor tech becomes part of the national planning and procurement, that funding remains, and that fees that we request from our local authorities and ICBs ask for that investment in sustaining this type of solution for digital tech, because the ROIs are unquestionable. And we at Care England will keep pushing for the funding for this tech, but we need care providers to join us. Tell your local authorities, tell the ICBs, write to the Casey Commission, tell them how you can improve care within your services with the right financial returns from utilising this technology. And consider investing yourself in these solutions, because they are solutions and they will pay back, because the ROI is overwhelmingly positive. So probably just to draw my bit to an end, I do not believe in any way, shape or form that sensor tech is a gimmick. It's not a gadget, and it certainly isn't a luxury. I think it's a practical, proven way to deliver safer, more dignified care, to reduce pressure on the NHS and our own care services, to help us reduce staffing costs and keep them from rising, and to give staff more time to provide outstanding care that we know they joined up in our services to deliver. Sensor tech is really a solution to the rising acuity that we struggle to staff with the trouble we have with our workforce and trying to retain them. It's the support we need to continue. It's the consistency we need to continue to provide high quality care in our services. And by engaging now, we can prevent harm before it happens. We can reduce costs across the whole system, and we can transform adult social care for what I believe is for the better. That's probably as much as I'll say on the subject, but you can see that I'm very pro sensor tech. I think there are huge advantages, and I'm excited to see the rest of the presentation today to learn more myself. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Richard. A great introduction. Brilliant to hear more about sort of the national picture. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen now, and Tom is going to take over the screen. And yeah, I'm delighted to invite Tom, Samir and Mel to share their insights.
Apologies. Sorry about that. Let me share my screen. Okay, can you see my, can I check? Can you see my screen? Is it not working? No.
Yes.
Why is that now not sharing? Apologies, everyone. I apologise. I will jump in and jump out and see if I can get the screen sharing in a second. But I just want to say, Richard, thank you so much for what really was a wonderful introduction. And I agree with a lot of what you say, but I will jump off and jump back in and see if that solves the problem of sharing my screen, which was working absolutely fine. Yes, so hold on for a second.
Thomas, would you like me to try and share from mine?
Yes. Do you want to try? I don't really know why it stopped working, if I'm entirely honest. Oh, there we go. How's that?
It's coming up now, Tom. Yeah, there we go.
Oh, perfect. Finally. So apologies for that. Yeah, Richard, as I was saying, thank you so much for the introduction. I agree with a lot of what you said, and you had some really lovely insights, especially in things like SensorTech is able to spot things that you can't see. It's about giving you the unobserved data that helps you improve the quality of decisions that you make, and ultimately helping people live healthy, happier, longer lives that has benefits across the entirety of the health and social care system. So thank you very much. In terms of what we're going to do between the three of us, myself, the wonderful Mel, and the wonderful Samir, is I will give a little bit of a background and introduction to our business. And then Samir and Mel will talk a little bit about their experiences of using our system as a sensor-based system within their services and the outcomes that they got. We've specifically titled this, I guess, this webinar around being beyond falls. I think there's been a lot of conversations out over the last 2 years around falls detection, falls prevention, and the value of reducing falls. But when I started the company with my colleagues, that was a pillar, a single pillar of an area of value that we wanted to be able to help with. We wanted to give insights into those things that are unobserved, that are related to residents' care needs. And that is not just mobility-based concerns. That could be residents in pain, that could be respiratory issues, that could be that they're hallucinating. It can vary, but anything that if you as a carer were present, you would help with, regardless of if it's mobility-based. And in doing so, as Richard said, if you have an upgrade in your sensing technology within the care room and you're able to miss essentially nothing, then you can start to actually achieve to give residents better privacy, better independence, and also better rest. And rest was a big pillar for us as to why we started the business, as it allows people to recover, improving themselves physically and mentally. And there's been a recent paper put out by Care England in partnership with us and the providers that we work with, showing some of the key benefits and the knock-on effects that rest can have, and promoting that within your services can have from a benefit both for residents and for staff. So I'll let Mel and Samir introduce themselves very quickly. So Mel, do you want to go first?
Hi, I'm Melanie Dawson, and I work for a small care providing company. We've got 5 homes in the group. My home is 62 beds, and I have an fairly even split of residential and nursing beds. So across the gamut of requirements, really, around the type of people we care for. So for me, Ally was something that I was really keen to use to improve how we would manage our nighttime care of our residents and start working smarter, not harder.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Samir Patel, and we own and operate 3 care homes down in Hampshire. We specialise in residential dementia care, and we've been using the Ally system for 3 or 4 years now, so fairly early adopters. And actually, we came into this not necessarily from a Falls perspective, but actually we were looking around resident sleep and sleep patterns and what we could do to improve sleep for our residents. So yeah, thank you so much for inviting us along this afternoon, Tom, and the Digital Care Hub team. Very grateful to be here, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Samir, and thank you, Mel. Just to give everybody a bit of a background about us. We are called Ally Cares. As I said, we started the company really with a goal to help residents live healthier, happier, longer lives, and try and solve some of the problems around safety that are related to residents when they're alone in their bedrooms. We're deployed in over 6,000 bedrooms now across the UK. We come from a rich vein of research. So we started with an NHS digital study that we ran over 18 months with 200 residents, which we've now expanded out to over 2,000 bedrooms across the UK with the NHS and ICBs. So a tiny little intro. We provide into each resident's bedroom a sound and motion monitoring system. The idea being that you replicate as best as you possibly can having a person in the room. So if you've got a resident on their side in pain, you would hear it and respond to it. If you've got a resident who's high risk of falls mobilizing, you'd be aware of it and intervene. But equally that we would be able to identify and eliminate sleep disruptors, so giving frame of reference on what's disrupting that resident's sleep, keeping them up and stopping them recover. Track and notify to other particular needs, so that might be respiratory concerns, or that might be the fact that they're more agitated. And ultimately giving care teams the ability to better plan care by giving that level of unobserved care insights and allowing those residents to live a healthier, happier, longer lives. So I wanted to share right up front. So this is obviously Falls Awareness Week, and falls are a massive thing, and we have a massive impact on them, helping reduce over 2/3 or more in each of Samir's and Mel's homes. But we've done a lot of work looking at what have been the relative impacts across the measures that we do. And preventing falls actually accounts for only just 16% of the improvement in the length of life of the residents within those homes in terms of the fact that it's increased. That's not a very large proportion of it. A lot of it comes from the other areas that Sensitech can be able to give you as insights into residents' needs and how you can improve their lives to be healthier and happier for longer. And I'll give you one little insight before we dive into a little bit more about background story. This is a resident with a tracheostomy who we help monitor. They were on one-to-one care with the staff member sat outside and the door was open. And essentially, this was set up in order to be able to know if that resident was in distress or needed suctioning, but it meant that she couldn't rest and she still had the fear that there might be something missed. So what they were able to do was use us to be able to monitor that resident, be able to close the door to give her some better rest and better privacy. And the consequences of that were that her anxiety reduced, she had more relaxed and enjoyable days, and her reduced the risk of hospital admissions because the suction was more effective. The reason why I'm telling this story is I think it really highlights the breadth of the right Sensitech monitoring can give across residents from both a non-mobile versus mobile care needs. So I actually started the business, it's coming up to I think almost 10 years now, 10 years ago, in actually about 8 years ago in 2018. And I had, I think like many people who get into care, I'd had family experiences with my grandparents going through care. And what I had noticed was that there are always points in time where something bad happens and you get unwell, right? And what I've got here is just a little graph. So if I explain it, on the left-hand side, pre-admission is when my grandmother was at her home. And then the right-hand side was when she ended up into a care home. And if you see on the left-hand side, she had a fall at her own home. She got unhealthy. So on the y-axis is her general health. And then she recovered a bit, got back some of her mobility. And then she had a stroke and she ended up in a care home. So there's always kind of a point in time reason as to how you end up in care. What this graph I try and show is that what we observed was that when she was at home, she was able to recover. She was able to rest and recuperate, which is a very normal thing prescribed by doctors to you. But when she went into the care home, and this is no fault of their own, it's a much busier environment. It's not as bad as a hospital, but it meant that it was harder for her to recover. And that meant that her baseline health never improved. It just sort of maintained until the next thing came along, like a chest infection. She wasn't in a position where she could either fight off catching it or actually fight it better. So each time she wasn't able to recover. But there were, I would say, probably 4 pillars of this that I actually identified. One was that she couldn't rest. The other was that when she was in her bedroom, there were early signs of health changes that were missed. So if you take the chest infection, increasing coughing is a really good example of a chest infection happening. There were times when she did fall and her bedroom needs were missed. She originally didn't have a full sensor mat, and then she learned how to get around them. And then the staff within the home were also really, really stretched, right? So you're balancing giving her privacy and independence, but you're also very busy within the home. And she was very aware of that and chose a lot of the time not to be able to ask for assistance or necessarily to communicate her problems very well. So a little bit about us. We have a little device that goes into each resident's bedroom. We have an infrared sensor within it and 2 microphones. It connects to Wi-Fi, plugs into power, and there's an app on your phone where you receive both notifications of when the residents are active in some way as detected by sound or motion, and insights that you can add into your care plan. So these kind of fall into 3 buckets. The alerts, so that might be someone calling for help, panicking, being upset or disorientated, pain, discomfort, or moving. Some context alerts around any disruptive factors within the sleep environment that are personalized to that person. So that could just be simply corridor noise. It could be the radiator turning on, but giving you some understanding on how you could potentially help them sleep. And the benefits of sleep are very broad and very wide from a recovery perspective, but also any residents who are actually resting in their room are less likely to be up, active and mobile at night, which means that the risk of falls goes down as well. And then the insights part, which show you trends on sleep, how much care, and give you an understanding on if there's any increase in coughing or agitation. So that's a general overview of us. I'm going to give 3 examples, right? So falls are obviously one of the focuses that are spoken about. But by having different insights coming out of our product, we have a lot of stories that are very varied. So just 3 of them. A resident here was heard being in pain. They were able to obviously correlate that against the care plan, confirm that there had been an earlier incident, reassess their pain levels, and issue an update to their pain medication. I think that's a lovely story. Little things, but things that do help. There was also a resident that we've worked with before who was confused in a way and started talking to themselves in their bedroom. That would have been previously unnoticed, but was abnormal. Looking in on the care plan and the email system, they could see that a medication had been introduced in the previous week and hallucinations were the side effects. So they got that changed. Again, that may have happened at a later point in time and could have led to other more serious outcomes. And then I've got a category here called the ally enabled. It's not where we've necessarily prompted, but it's where the insights have been used. So there was a resident that we worked with Huntington's disease. They were losing weight and were generally more distressed. So what they were able to do was look across all of their data and see that there was a correlation between the daytime events, and particularly meal times and nighttime restlessness. And essentially, they realized that that resident was hungry, and that was causing a lot of this distress. So they came up with a plan to get her to have more calories quickly. And that had a very quick knock-on effect to help that resident become happier, calmer, sleeping better, putting weight on, and more active and engaged in the day. So it's just having like these little knock-on pieces that you either can correlate back against because there's another prompt from your care planning system, or us prompting out around a trend that you can then have an impact on. And I think that for me, that is the real power of having a sensor tech in place that gives you that understanding of all of that resident's needs when they're alone in their room, and gives you the power to be able to actually give them that privacy, independence, and rest. This is actually the timelines of that resident with Huntington's disease. So if you'll see, this is the top graph, and I think Mel in a bit will be able to show you a little bit how they use this, but this is part of our Insights platform. Anything that's in green here is when they're really active, as detected through sound. Anything that's a little blip here in purple is that they're active because of motion. And what you can see is that before they made their intervention, that resident was really struggling and was really active. And afterwards, they were much more restful. And that meant that apart from being happier, calmer, obviously sleeping well and putting on weight, that person had a general improvement in their baseline health, which meant that they had better resilience overall to any problems that develop, both physically and mentally. I think that's a really powerful thing. Okay. So I'm going to bring up the two case studies in terms of Mel's home with the lawns, and then we'll bring up Samir's outcomes as well. So I think it's probably best for me to hand over to you at this point to talk a little bit about, I would say, your experiences with us. We can go over some of the outcomes, and then more around some of how you've ended up changing some of your practices based on what you're getting as the insights from the sensor tech. So Mel, do you want to jump in?
Right, thanks, Tom. So like everyone else, we were looking for, initially falls reduction, but actually there were lots of other things that happened for us. So that 61% on better sleep was something that became really quite evident. It's all about a culture change when you're starting to use technology, and especially with night staff, it's a massive culture change. And I'm sure Samir will talk about that as well. As a registered manager of a home, what you want to be doing is having your staff doing the things that they need to be doing, not the things that they're doing because they're scared of getting themselves into trouble. So in most care homes, you've got staff at night going around checking on people, and what they're doing is they're checking that people are asleep. And actually what we want them to be doing is focusing in on spending time with those people that are awake and identifying why people are awake and providing care so that those people get a restful night. But if they're spending all of their time walking around and around and around and checking, they're actually not achieving what we're looking for. So with Ally, what we can do is replicate what people do at home. So I personally at home would be go into my bedroom at night, I'd shut my bedroom door and I'd go to bed. And I would not want somebody wandering in and standing over me and having a look to see whether I'm asleep. But we seem to feel that's okay to do in a care home. So part of this process of it alerting us to movement and to sound in the room gives you some confidence that actually, if anything is happening behind that closed door, that your team are going to get an alert and they're going to be doing something about it. And the knock-on effect there gave us this evidence of 61% of people were getting better sleep because they weren't being bothered by the staff checking whether they were asleep, because it's all, it just is counterintuitive. We saw that our residents were more active and more engaged during the day. We also then saw, because they were more active and engaged during the day, they were eating and drinking better. So weights and fluid intake were greatly improved. Fluid intake improved, which on the knock-on is that infections reduced. We were having to use less sleep medications, antipsychotics, because people were naturally sleeping and not being disturbed, which then led them to feel that they needed to take something to help them to sleep. And then when we started analysing where we were at with the fall stuff, we found that we got 63% fewer nighttime falls in bedrooms. That was a massive 88% of my high-risk residents had got a lower falls risk, and 33% on my low-risk people. But also we had less daytime falls, and people say, well, why daytime falls? Well, if you're more awake, you don't fall over. It's fairly simple and logical. But the big thing that came out of it, and that sort of linked to it, was the fact that we actually released 6 hours of time from staff just doing checks that they really didn't need to do, so we could get them to concentrate on providing that higher level of quality care to those people that absolutely needed it overnight. So it's been transformational from my point of view, and it allows me to do a little bit around that real analysis of where we're at. And if I could just show you just a little bit of a timeline and something that I do that's, you know, fairly active. I'm going to stop sharing this screen and I'll just share the next screen so that you can just see something a little bit different in my timeline. One that like the one that Tom showed you earlier. So I'm hoping that that's going to come up now. So this is one of my active timelines. So this shows you one of my residents, and this is sort of, so me as a manager, I would come on duty and it's going to show me there's an active anomaly on this person. They've been a little bit more active, so I can take a really good look at what this person's up to. So I can see that my care team have activated the ally here. Because this chap's now settled in bed, we've got a little bit of sound and we've got a little bit of motion going on, but this is the alert that I get them from my team. So my team have remotely listened in to what's occurring in that bedroom, and they've listened in and they're really happy about what they're hearing because they know this person really well, and they've been able to dismiss that alert because they were unconcerned about what it was. That alert is then transferred immediately into our digital care note system, which is brilliant, and it's all timelined and it's great. Now, if I go to the next alert, you can see that we've got a little bit more going on here with movement and a bit more sound. And when I go up and have a look, I can see that actually what's happened on this one is that they've listened into it and they've gone and they've provided care for this chap. And they've settled him down and he's gone back to bed, and we've got another alert. So, and then we've got some really great episodes of sleep until he's decided to get up. But if I compared that to a different night, I can see what his norm is. So it means that what I can do is I can really take a good look at this person over a period of time, and I can see what his pattern is, and I can see what's going on, and then I can set in place that where care is instructed by me to my care team to ensure that we're meeting the needs of that person that are really reflective of what we've identified his care needs are and what we feel that the staff should be doing. So they're not getting anxious and they're not getting worried about it. And I hope that gives you some sort of idea of how we use some of this technology. And for the majority of my residents, when I look at my scheduler in the morning, I've 62 people in the building, and most of the time I've got 55, 56 of them that have got no anomalies at all. It's always a very, very small proportion. The absolute majority of the people that I care for sleep all night long, and it's great because you can get your care staff really honing in on the people that need that care. Doesn't detract from any of that sort of clinical stuff that we all need to do, because people will often say to me, well, what about repositioning and things like that? All of that still happens. What we're looking for is that those undisturbed episodes of sleep that you wouldn't know about unless you were there in the room at the time. So that's what I'm looking for. So that's my bit about us and the lawns and everything. And I'll click on now. So
thank you, Mel. Mel, if you want to stop sharing your screen as well, it will pop back onto mine, I think. Thanks so much. I think the way that you use the system is really great in terms of going in, looking for any trend changes with those residents, getting your feedback from your care team and looping that back into how you plan care. And I think it's really interesting for me when we look at the stats, not only around the knock-on effects of sleep on these residents who are more active and engaged. I think you've even gone around and you've got residents that are stay awake in the day until later. So you mentioned to me that you've got a wine and cheese club that you've set up so that they can be more entertained in the evening, which I think is fantastic. But the knock-on effects on weight and fluids and the reduction of infections, and even down to the fact that if we take the 33% reduction in low risk falling residents, the ones who would allow to mobilise and allowed to be independent, that reduction there is purely down to the fact that they can sleep. And we've spoken a lot about sleep here, but I think the reason why you're able to, the care homes that we work with are able to invest in sleep is because you know that for your higher risk residents that may not have mobility as the primary concern, you can still catch anything that is of concern through sound. It can be caught and it can be alerted to, and so that you have a total holistic view. If they are in pain, if they are starting to hallucinate, if they're calling for help but they're not mobilizing, you have that as a total backup on top, as a layer on top of what you would normally have from in other homes of, say, a pressure mat for when somebody mobilizes. So that's really positive. Mel, thank you very much for those insights. Samir, if I move on to your home, you've had realistically incredibly similar results, which is great because they are exactly what we see across the majority of our care homes, that all the care homes that we work with. So I wanted to ask you before we go into these, really, if you could talk to everyone who's here about what were your motivations. So on starting with Ally, you've touched on it a little bit earlier. Mel mentioned how falls were her initial start point, and she's been surprised by the knock-on effects of sleep. But it would be interesting to hear your journey with us.
Thanks, Tom, and Mel, thanks as ever for some great insights there. And you're absolutely right. I think we share a lot of similarities in terms of the outcomes we've seen since we've been adopting Ally. I actually came into Ally from a slightly different perspective. And I know this was probably about 15 years ago when I started thinking about sleep for our residents. And it came about from when my second child was born, my middle daughter, not the first daughter, because she was an absolute angel and slept all night. But I realized very quickly that Samir was not a very nice person, waking up, trying to do the dutiful daddy bits of waking up and, helping support with night feeds and nappy changes and the rest of it. And it did kind of have that light bulb moment for me when I thought, well, if I'm feeling like this from waking up to help look after this newborn baby, we're going in and disturbing our residents every 2 hours because that's kind of the institutionalized way that we were working. And I think it was really interesting that, Mel mentioned that kind of that ingrained ways of working that we have of, not necessarily positive risk taking, but that's the way we've always done it. So this is what we're going to continue doing. If it ain't broke, don't try to fix it. So our journey actually trying to find some sort of a solution started many, many years ago. And we just couldn't find one. And Richard mentioned earlier on about, the Scandi countries maybe being a bit ahead of us. We looked and we were very fortunate to be able to go out and look at various systems. We just couldn't find one actually that would importantly give us that ROI that we were looking for. We wanted to invest in better sleep for our residents, but financially it just didn't make sense. And obviously when we came across Ally, things clicked in and financially it seemed to make sense. And we thought, actually, this is going to give us a real good base to improve the quality of sleep for our residents. And as that's developed over time, as these numbers suggest, there's been a whole load of other unintended consequences that we didn't really think about. So, which has been fantastic, and even more advantageous for our business case and for these such case studies as we're talking about today. But yeah, for me, the initial foray into trying to find some sensor tech, and Ally was our first foray into sensor tech in terms of adoption within one of our services. We've been thoroughly blown away really with the results, not only, as I say, for the quality and the impact it's had for our residents' sleep, but for our night team and their ways of working. That's had such a huge positive impact in them being able to target their care, be much more personalised with the care they're delivering. But it's also had a positive impact on our residents' families, who are so much more reassured about the care that's being delivered at night. When there are things that go wrong, because we are care services and things do go wrong, the families, I think, feel that positive impact of us being able to share information and data about how that night looked, and have a bit more insight into what's gone on at night. So yeah, that was our initial foray into it. It's kind of grown and snowballed from there, Tom.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure really working with your care team. And I think seeing the differences at both homes is what I would almost say. It's a very corny way of saying it, but it's kind of literally physically night and day. The homes have changed from being a sort of a slight variance, a slight change between the day and the night, to quite a marked difference of residents being more active in the day and the nights feeling like your home at night, quieter and darker, and that is beneficial. It allows recovery. And what's interesting here, if I pick up on one point, so the 50% fewer infections. I know when we first started working, there was the sort of surprise around, oh, we can pick up that indicator of a chest infection, and we can pick up that indicator of a UTI. That's not stopping the infection in the first place. That's allowing earlier treatment. But the stopping of the infection in the first place comes from the underlying better health. And when I try and sort of think about how I want to live my life, I know that there's kind of 4 rough pillars that I want to have. I want to be able to eat well, sleep well, be active in some way, so do exercise, and be social. Those are kind of my 4 things. And if you pull one of them out, it can start to really impact on how you physically and mentally feel and make you more susceptible to changes in health. And I would like to skip through very quickly a couple of the slides, if that's okay, just to some, go to this. So just to some research that we put out. Oh, where's it gone? With Care England. So sleep has a known huge impact, other than how you felt, Samir, after your second child waking up, or maybe how I feel with 3 kids under 5, which makes my life, I have very varying days, is all I can say. But there's so much research out there that says that it increases the risk of Alzheimer's, increases the risk of depression, increases the risk of hypertension, stroke, etc. But there are 2 quite substantial studies that say that sleep disruption will increase the risk of mortality by 25%, or across 56,000 people, that those that lived for 20 years with sleep disturbance lived 1.3 years less than those that lived without it. Like, they're quite, I don't know, shocking studies when I went into it. You know, the start of the company was kind of based on a hunch. And I'm really proud that both of your homes feel confident in having both the monitoring of mobility needs and the monitoring of non-mobility needs. Gives you the confidence to give those residents as much privacy and rest as possible, and that you get those insights that can allow you to, if a chest infection does develop, you can go back in and investigate it.
I think the first instance, maybe I'll give you an example of for us, Tom, was we actually managed to avoid a COVID outbreak because we were hearing coughs coming through at night on someone's monitor, which allowed us then to keep them isolated and do the COVID tests in the morning. And we would never have known that if we didn't have the Ally sensor technology in that in our homes and in our rooms. So that was a huge, again, light bulb moment for us, where we could realise some of these unintended consequences. And likewise, as you've mentioned, being able to hear people's coughs at night time, or slight changes to their normal sleeping patterns. And I think that's an important point to mention as well, right? If the system learns what your normal sleeping pattern is, and that personalization that we sometimes have this fear of in utilizing technology and sensor technology, I think it's very important that when we do look to utilize the sensor technology, that it does have that ability to be able to learn what each particular resident's norms are. So in our case, obviously, we're talking about sleeping patterns here, and if you're like me, you're a snorer at night time, it will only send alerts if you stop snoring. I think that's really important to us to think about as well, about when we are looking to adopt technologies in our service, that it continues with this ethos that we all have of wanting to provide personalised care to our residents.
I'll come back a few slides now. Let's go back. So one of the things that we've been able to do recently with you, which I think is quite fun. So we've obviously been deployed in the market now since 2018. 2020 was when we launched after the original NHS study. But starting about 8 months ago, I went back to some of the providers and started talking to them about, well, these outcomes are really, really, really positive, and I'm hearing great stories around how residents do come into the care home and improve their baseline health rather than maintain it and recover. And I think that was my original goal and motivation with my grandmother. But then the question was, what's the knock-on effect for the care home and for that resident, right? And Samir, you had some absolutely powerful statistics in the 2 years after we had been implemented, with the first 2 points being huge. Do you want to? I guess you should have the privilege of reading those out.
No, I think it's the privilege comes down to, I think, the quality of care that our team are delivering being enhanced really by the various different tech solutions that we've adopted over the years. And this one for us, I think Richard discussed business cases earlier on and the benefits of the NHS, but I think it's also important for us as providers to make sure that we are seeing some of those financial benefits, right? And so that we can reinvest in our services and reinvest in the training of our teams and make sure we are sustainable for the future. And this was really telling for me in terms of trying to justify some of the investments we've made over the year in technology. And the first one at the top there, you've got occupancy improving by 16%. That's obviously a very straightforward, easy one for us to look at in terms of what our average occupancy rates were in previous years. And since we've adopted some of these new technologies, including Ally. But actually, we also very often we worry about filling beds and trying to get inquiries into homes. One thing that we've been looking at and discussing within our services is actually, well, there is this quality piece, and we want to be able to, even though people are coming to us with much higher needs, actually, what can we do to make sure that they are living longer, fuller lives as well? And one of the ways that we measure that is in terms of length of stay of our residents. And we found, since we've adopted Ally and some various other technologies as well, we have seen that our average length of stay has actually increased despite the sector factors of increasing needs, from 81 weeks to 89 weeks, which again, as a business and as part of our business case is hugely powerful. It also, moving on to the second point we have there in terms of all mortality rate, which is something else that we do look at. If we've reduced the number of deaths by 2 a year as a service as well, what a wonderful thing for us to be able to celebrate and ensure that our team are aware of, because we are here to look after people. If we can keep people living a longer, healthier, better life for a few more months or a few more years, that's fantastic. But again,
I think
one of these other. Sorry, Tom.
Yeah, okay, if I jump in, one of the things I would add on this is that this is your average, right? So some people, there may be a little bit of a less of an impact, and some, you may have a resident that you would expect to be in your home for only 6 to 9 months and is there 18 months later. just by being able to piece that puzzle together better and create a better environment for them to flourish in. And I think that that is amazing, and that they can live that better life for those 18 months where they're active, they're social, as best as they possibly can, versus feeling a bit less positive. So I'll stop at that point and let you carry on.
Yeah, no worries. And I think the other important stat there is that we've obviously used some of the data we've collected from Ally, and we, as I say, we not only celebrate it with the members of the team, but also with our families, but also importantly, families that may be looking for a care service. You know, we use a lot of the information about Ally at the point of visits to the care home. And again, we undoubtedly know that led to, in this particular home, 3 additional inquiries being converted, choosing us over a home down the road because we had this piece of sensor tech over the home down the road that didn't have it. So again, these are all important factors, I think, in terms of this ROI that we do have to consider and have to be aware of in these tricky financial times that we have.
Now, thank you very much. I want to come back to the original stat that I put up right at the beginning of the presentation, saying that falls were only contributing 16% to improving length of stay or length of life. So in this case, length of stay is length of life, right? But I wanted to break it down a little bit because we did an exercise on what has been the impact from falls, reduced infections, and the knock-on effects of sleep. And I wanted to put that up here, showing really that actually the area to drive at is ultimately sleep, in terms of adding those extra 3 weeks on average of length of life. With every time a fall happens, you don't necessarily end up in hospital, but it ranges, what you can see, between 3 to 12%, with 28% of those not returning. And each time that they don't return, that adds up as a total of 3 months lost, which you can see across broad data as well as Samir's homes data as well. Whereas sleep, you can look at the research that we highlighted earlier in terms of just life being shorter because of health going down. So I think I wanted to bring this up. We can come back to it. We can really hold discussions by people's questions. But the trust in terms of allowing people to rest within the home comes from the tech that you have in place, and the trust that you have in it in terms of alerting you to concerns and problems, whether that's for a resident with a tracheostomy, whether that's a resident with mobility concerns. So I'll leave it on that point. And I'll let Samir and Mel, if you want to add anything. Otherwise, we can move on to some of the questions. From everybody who's on the call.
Thanks so much, guys.
Right.
Mel and Samir, assuming you're happy for us to move on to questions, do dive in if you want to. Tom, Mel, Samir, thank you so much. That was such an insightful sort of exploration into the benefits of sensor tech. You know, so broad spanning, not only for the individual but others around them. We'll just dip into a couple of questions that have come through on the chat. So first one, Tom, probably best aimed at you, is does this integrate with digital care planning systems?
Yes. So there are 3 that we integrate with. We integrate with PCS, which is actually the provider that is used by both Samir and Mel, Nourish, and Carein, who are, I think, are now a smaller provider in comparison. So yeah, 100% we integrate, and I think as Mel noted, times that we alert and the notes that can be made within our system will pass over into the care record system, which gives you that sort of additional point of single source of truth, and you can come back into us for further investigations around that resident.
Thanks, Tom. That was really helpful. Okay, next question is, can this be used in supported living settings that have waking night staff?
That is a good question. So yes, if a staff member is obviously on a waking night, you can use it. I will say, operate predominantly, I'd say almost exclusively actually in care homes versus supported living. But if you want to get in touch with us and we have a chat about being utilised in supported living to track mobility and non-mobility needs and give you an understanding of your residents and alerting your waking night staff, 100% do get in touch. I'll move the slide on so that you can see our contact details at the end.
Amazing. Thanks, Tom. That's really helpful. I mean, also just to highlight, obviously Ally, sorry, is an amazing piece of software. There are others out there that potentially are more suited or more experienced or more set up in other settings. So, just look at cross-section of what's out there, and find what's right for your organisation. A question aimed probably more at Mel and Samir now, is just whether there was any sort of pushback, resistance or concerns raised by, Mel, you mentioned staff, but also clients or their family members when you first looked at introducing the tech.
I think from my point of view, it's all about communication with these people. So talking to families and residents around the benefits of it is really important. They get it really easily. They understand the benefits of it. And as Samir said, often people will choose us rather than a home down the road because we've got this technology, and they know that their people are going to get better sleep because they're not being disturbed in the night. Doesn't fall away from the fact that you as a CQC registered home, you still need to do all of those elements of mental capacity assessments and consents and all of those sort of things. It happens. But I've not, in the time of having Ally in place, had anybody object to Ally being in use in the home. Residents, family, staff came along the journey. It's a big thing to change the way that people are working, but when they realise the difference, that they work really well. It is a culture change for staff to work in a different way. But if you've got a good staff team that are open to change, then it's an easy journey. But I have a champion for my Ally system in my care team, and Stacey supports all of the other team members to understand what the alerts are doing, tweaking the system slightly, just working really closely with me to make sure that we're getting the best out of it that we possibly can. So we haven't had major barriers that have come along at all.
I think I would just reiterate, Fiona, technology is not actually about the technology, whether it's Ally or any other centre out there. It is about people. Ultimately, we're here to care for people. And as Mel rightly said, the biggest, I suppose, piece of advice I would give to anybody is bring your staff team on that journey. Get them involved from as early as possible about the ideas or the suggestions of what it is you're looking to introduce, and get their buy-in, because ultimately they're the amazing guys that are doing all the work on the front end. And ultimately, you want to make sure you're getting really good data in, so that some of these data insights we've shared today, as what's coming out the other end, you can then analyse and then hopefully make, good decisions for your business from there. So yeah, get your team involved really early. And similar to Mel, we had pushback maybe from our night team because it was going to be a completely different way of working. But we worked with them and we came up with a joint plan about how the best way it was going to be for us to roll it out in our service. And it might be different to how other providers do it. But it's going to be what's right for you in your service, because we're all slightly different in our own little ways. And every team is slightly different as well.
Thanks, guys.
Can
really useful. Yeah, no, go
add to that? On both of those 2 points, I think the way that Mel communicates around the value of the product, and the same with Samir, is highlighted in the fact that all residents consent in both their homes, but also additional inquiries are coming and choosing their homes. And I think when I was working originally on this product with the problems that I saw for my grandmother, I asked myself the question, which is, would I want to put my grandmother in a care home where she can rest and recover, be less likely to fall, less likely to have an infection, and be active and engaged in the day? The answer is yes. And that is I guess, reiterated across a lot of our other providers. There was one that said something to me, which is like, it's great. Our mantra is that if you come to this home, you will live an active and healthy life. And they feel that they're able to fulfill that mantra when families come and visit and they have active and engaged relatives, which was a problem that we struggled with as a family going to visit my grandmother, where instead of having an afternoon nap in the day, she was sleeping at different times. And it was, I would say, an element of heartbreak as to what do you do when you visit? And there's your relative is clearly stressed and fatigued. What do? You want to see them. It's a hard combination. And then the other point in terms of the cultural change is, I'd say it's really, as they both said, it's really important to be very upfront with your staff that you are monitoring now what is unobserved, and you are going to be aware of what is unobserved, but your main focus is to move to virtual care. And there is a massive benefit for that resident in getting rest and privacy. And there is a massive benefit for your team as well to get back the time to spend with those residents that need it. And you'll see the knock-on effects for them in the day. But moving to that mindset of I'm not doing regular rounds, and moving to that mindset of I'm providing care only when it's needed, is very critical to set that up front as the expectation on where the project is going and how you're going to launch it.
Thanks, Tom. Really helpful tips. I think they're for anyone that's considering it, and I'm sure challenges and that other people have faced. So final thing that's come through in the Q&A, it's a little bit more of a statement, but just somebody saying that they're glad you've mentioned training, and just referencing around sort of when will NHS allow funds to train staff to use all software available to them. Obviously, we're not the NHS, we can't necessarily pass comment on that, but I think it just adds clout to the comments around sort of training and engagement with staff and utilising the resources and tools that we have available to us. So thank you for that comment. We have answered all the questions that are through. So I think we will draw the session to a close unless anybody's got anything else to add. We can give everybody 15 minutes of their day back, time to go and maybe grab a cup of tea if you're lucky. So thank you all so much. As I said at the start, you will get a copy of the recordings and the slides, and hopefully we are leaving you full of thoughts and ideas and inspiration around the huge, broad spanning benefits of sensor tech. Everybody's details, we've got that Ally Care's details on the screen, and I will pop our details in the chat as well, so that if you need anything from Digital Care Hub, you can get in touch with us. Thank you all so much. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us.